First of all, thank you everyone for attending this great webinar. I'm very excited about hosting it along with my very good friend and great ambassador, Steve Zalewski, who's going to moderate this exciting webinar. We try to do something different and innovative this time around. All our webinars are great, but this one is kind of different and hopefully it's going to be immensely valuable for all the attendees. So we're going to discuss, actually, as the title clearly highlighted, all the upcoming projects that these esteemed four ambassadors of Execweb have. And also we're going to discuss where they see the cybersecurity industry as a whole going for the next 12 months or so. I think that visibility obviously is of great value to the cybersecurity professionals, both on the marketing and the sales side, as well as obviously the founders themselves. We wanted to provide that visibility to further enhance your offerings and how you position yourselves and improve that interaction and collaboration between cybersecurity vendors and security practitioners, which is always our goal. For that purpose, to be authentic and genuine, though, we had to obviously keep the identities of our ambassadors anonymous so that they can freely speak about the projects that they're looking potentially to onboard third-party vendors to help them with the upcoming projects, which is why we have Michael, David, Tom, and Joe, obviously not their real names, who have agreed to participate in this innovative approach. And again, thank you everybody for joining. Steve is going to moderate, and Steve, go ahead, take it from here. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Val. So we anticipate about 45 minutes for everybody, about 45 minutes to do this. And when we talked about this, my analogy here is we're doing the dating game. For those of you that are like me that remember that, all of you are the candidate that's sitting with the moderator, okay? And on the other side of the screen are four potential dates, okay? And what we're now going to do is, with that anonymity, we're going to ask the four CISOs here to introduce themselves, to give you a sense of who they are without knowing. And you're going to be on the other side with me, and I'm going to start with asking them some questions that everybody is curious about. But then all of you on the call, right, through the Q&A or the chat, are welcome to pose the questions that you want to ask, to be able to try to figure out, based on who they are or what they've represented, the questions that you want to ask. And so therefore, in an anonymous way, we can really have a brutal truth conversation. And everybody's agreed to it, and this is why we thought it's going to be really interesting, because everybody has the opportunity to not be politically correct, but to really represent their perspectives. And so, you know, in the trusted fashion here, we thought, let's give it a try. So we want all of you to participate. As you have questions, put them in, because the more you ask, the more everybody kind of learns, right? Because now we're seeing what we're thinking, what we want to do beyond the you know, obvious questions as we go in. Okay, so Val will be monitoring with me, and let's kick off. So we have four CISOs on the call. And so let's meet our candidates, which is I'll ask each of them to spend a couple of minutes talking about their background, their vertical, so that you get a sense of the experience and the perspective that they're representing. Okay, and then once we go through that, I'll ask the first obvious question. Again, let them get some perspective for you. That gets us in a role. And then as it naturally progresses, ask questions, or I will, to continue. So in no particular order, our first CISO, Joe, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, everyone. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to answer any of your questions. So I've been working in cybersecurity for 20 years now. I've worked in multiple different markets, in financial side, public side, government side. I have a specialty in security engineering architecture and also with incident response.
Thank you, Joe. David.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you all. So I've been in the cybersecurity field for 10 plus years. Most of them I've spent in the financial sector, and I've been a CISO in a fintech company for the last almost 5 years. I'm leading a team of about 20 cybersecurity professionals, which are separated into different sub teams. So we have quite an extensive interest into different domains and solutions, and I would be glad to further discuss them with you.
Thank you, David. Michael.
Hello, everybody. I am also in the fintech space. I've been in cybersecurity for about 7 years now. Was a software developer and engineering manager prior to that. And I have a specialty in application security, specifically cloud security. But I dabble in everything, as you know, we have a very mixed team, and we dabble in all kinds of spaces. So I get involved with detection response and other verticals in the cybersecurity practice.
Okay. And Tom.
Hi, everyone. As you can see, I've been losing my hair for the past 22 years, dealing with cyber and tech. Various industries, similar to my peers here. I've been in tech, healthcare, finance, private equity, a few startups, and one other interesting place. Yeah, cyber has been my passion for the longest time, so I'm looking forward to the conversation here.
Excellent. All right. So, first question, which is the one that everybody wants to ask, is obviously what products or what problems are you looking to solve in 2025? So, for the vendors on the call, they obviously want to sell to you. But the way I'd like to characterize it is before you just get to the product, give everybody a sense of what's top of mind for you, for your company for 2025. Meaning, what is the business demanding of you, right, for requirements? And then based on that, where are you in the roadmap, which is, okay, based on that, what areas of technology are you looking at, right, to potentially buy for this year? So that way we have some context. Joe, I'll go ahead and start with you. You're on mute, Joe.
Sorry, I apologize.
Yep.
So what's the business is asking us is we are expanding quite rapidly, mostly in the European regions, expanding our EMEA locations and offices. So we're looking at the DORA regulations and what tooling and requirements that are being added to us going into this year. So when we talk about those new requirements, we're looking at improving our automated pen testing solutions. As part of regulatory requirements, we have to conduct an external and internal pen test. But we're looking at technologies in which those assessments can be performed autonomously and automatically. That'll help us identify as we, again, expand to new offices and build new networks and expand our data centers. We don't have sort of the staffing or resources to ensure that those environments are built up in a secure way. So one of the technologies that we're looking at this year is being able to perform automated assessments of those networks, the systems that are being stood up in the environments, and making sure that they're being stood up in a secure way. And again, around vulnerability management, same concept, being able to not only identify the vulnerabilities and risks in the environment, but able to quantify and validate that those risks are true so that we can prioritize the remediation in a more uniform fashion. So I think from our perspective, because of the new regulations that we're looking into next year and this year as well, is to sort of put some guardrails around the way that we do evaluations in real time, autonomously, to ensure that we're not introducing any additional risks to the environment as we expand.
Interesting. David.
So as you probably know, everyone is crazy about the AI nowadays. So it's on our agenda as well as an organization. And one of my main concerns and prerogatives is how to enable the business to use securely the artificial intelligence, because with all the support that the AI can provide to the business, there comes different attack vectors and expositions that we need to be very careful about. So looking for solutions, AI security solutions is one of my um, and our main prerogatives. Of course, another concern of ours is the application security side, enabling our developers and helping them writing a more secure code is a big concern of ours. So we are looking for a solid static application security testing and SCA solution. We have tested through the years a couple of solutions. All of the solutions have pros and cons, of course, but so far we weren't able to find the best and the most suitable for us. So this is another domain that we are particularly interested. Of course, DLP's insider risk, we have already implemented such a solution in our cybersecurity program, but we are always looking for ways to improve. So that's why we are, let's say, looking through the market for such platforms that have already incorporated artificial intelligence functionalities inside of their workflow. So this is something which is also of interest for us. And generally speaking, our sector is extremely competitive, so we have quite a severe push from the business to implement as much artificial intelligence as possible into our cybersecurity programs and business functions. So everything AI related to which can help us is more than welcome to be tested.
Michael.
David, you took a page out of my book because I was going to say the same exact thing. AI is such a disruptive force, and it has so many opportunities and so many requirements. And so we have to ensure that prompt injections are something that we are guarding against. And so we're looking at companies that can help with that regard. You know, something like a Lakera or Pangea or something like that is top of mind as we develop these chatbots that anybody in the world can access. So that's a big aspect of our work. And another aspect is the fact that developers are using AI to develop so much code nowadays. And that brings sort of a fear for me because they can also ship so many vulnerabilities. And so even though we've invested in traditional ASD tools, we need to find these things much faster. And so we're looking at beefing up our traditional SaaS with, AI enhanced workflows. We've seen some that work, but we're still testing those tools. Furthermore, AI is probably gonna play a big part in the future of AppSec and SecOps. So we're looking for a AI enhanced MDR. We pay so much for our MDR, right? Hundreds of thousands of dollars. And just based on initial discussions with these AI enhanced MDR vendors, we're seeing a huge reduction, almost like 1/10 of the price that we're paying. So we are earnestly looking at reviewing and testing these solutions. Hopefully something will work out for us, and that would be a huge win for our bottom line. And one other aspect that doesn't get discussed with AI is the ability to truly shift left as well, right? Because what if you had AI that could listen into all the changes happening in Jira or all the discussions that are happening on Slack? And when something that is security related gets discussed, I want to be alerted to it as soon as possible so I can insert myself as a security officer into that conversation. I think that's one of the promises of AI that I really hope will bear fruit. And we are looking at certain vendors in that space as well.
And Tom.
Hey, so I think one thing we probably haven't discussed as much is the consistent pressure from board and ELT members to reduce spending. Even though we're a large company, cyber is still part of tech, and they're being seen as part of the tech org. So if the tech org is spending X amount of dollars, we're included within that bucket, which is not necessarily what you want. I know some organizations have transitioned into having CISOs reporting to CEOs, but for us, that has been a challenge, right? On one side is like, how can you save money? How can you not spend money, but still make us secure and deal with all the compliance that we have to deal with, SOX, 10K SEC regulatory requirements, customer requests. That is challenging. And I think as a CISO, you need to balance, your budget, your sales tactics, but also be open to still be able to rip and replace things if that's the only way forward. So we had a few interesting initiatives. I think when people talk about AI, that's not necessarily a new attack vector. It's just a faster way of enhancing certain attacks that we're already used to, right? So ultimately, we want to look into and say, well, we have a DLP system, but is it capable of having visibility to things like Gen AI tools that people are using within the environment and then applying controls leveraging the existing tools? And are we working with vendors that have matured, to the point where they can incorporate some of these AI type attacks and visibility to allow us to not have to then go and get yet another tool just to do that, right? Because at some point you also don't want to kill your team with too many tools and not enough people to really manage all these tools. So another big project we're doing is evaluating the efficacy of these effectiveness of these tools, and are we using them to the extent that we need to, and if we're not, do we need them, right? And that will open up opportunities to buy new stuff, right? New shiny toys, and also have a program in place to be able to do POCs and be in a position to evaluate new vendors, because I think POC is really what's giving you the light, whether this tool is going to work or not, as opposed to just, sitting through a demo that's in a contained environment that looks great, but then once you start to implement it, it's not really doing what it's supposed to do. So hopefully that's helpful in terms of where we are today.
Yes. So if I had to summarize, right, what I heard what Joe said is I got to get ahead of vulnerabilities still. I've got, the business is demanding new use cases and I got to get a hold of vulnerabilities. David and Michael were AI. The business likes the concept of AI. And so we've got to figure out how we enable the use of AI for the business. And to a certain extent, how is AI valuable within the security community itself, right? Within my teams. And you hear Tom saying it's all about the dollars, which was I'm being demanded to reduce costs. And I'm still trying to have that conversation around, but in reducing costs, the business wants the same flexibility. So I asked that first, right? Because I'm very much business centric, which is we've got to make the business happy. Because if we don't, right, then our jobs are really just cost centers and we're in a tough shape. My second question to you for all of that is, now that we've talked about where the business is going and where your 2025 roadmap is, where am I going to shop for some technology maybe, but it's really dependent upon when the business, deploys. I want to ask a more tactical question, which is within what you have, as Tom said, which was, I got to reduce costs. Where, either from a maturity perspective, meaning I've got to increase maturity in a certain part of my program, or where I can see consolidation occurring to rip a couple out and put something in place. I'd like each of you to give me your 2025 thinking, right, of where, if I had some dollars, would I make that investment to improve maturity? Or where do I see the consolidation opportunity? What areas where I could see some tools coming out and either replacing with a single tool or just removing it because its ROI just isn't there? Okay. And in this case, Michael, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I haven't been really thinking about this from a consolidation perspective. It's more of swapping one thing for another. So MDR, traditional MDR, we are using a vendor in that space, and they haven't been quite giving us the the bang for the buck, so to speak. And so, my hope is that these new startup, AI enhanced MDRs combine both the pros and cons, the pros of having a traditional MDR with AI, right? Because they have a human team that is still looking at the output of these MDR bots. And so we're hoping that it reduces costs, but also we hope that the human element will still be there, and we can leverage their expertise where bots are falling short. So it's not so much of a consolidation play. We're just swapping one for one, but we're hoping that it's just going to be a better solution overall and a cheaper solution as well.
Okay, Tom?
Yeah, I think it's funny because I think there's another question from somebody around, which categories, areas of tech solutions that never delivered on promise, right? And I think that does come into play when we look into consolidation and what to invest in next. For us, probably a big one that keeps coming back and forth. We've been through like 2 or 3 different SIM products, and kind of like understanding next gen, where's SIM really going? I think the reason the old, what I call quote unquote old school SIMs are still around is because there's a compliance requirement to keep logs for, let's say, X amount of months. Usually it's a year, for compliance perspective. But the problem with that is you don't necessarily need it to sit in the SIM. You can just have a log stash somewhere to just keep it for compliance sake. And I find that a lot of this next gen is moving towards things like a lot of EDR tools and products out there are developing their own SIMs, and they're starting to ingest data into your EDR because they think that the endpoint is the source of truth for most issues and problems, right? A lot of these problems stem from a workstation, and then they propagate to other areas of your organizations from a threat perspective. So if you're able to capture it there, there's a lot of telemetry and interesting data that you can then feed and use as a centralized operations, right, for your team. Or if you're using an MDR, obviously it's useful for them as well. So that was one topic for us that keeps coming. And the other thing that seems to be happening, a lot of big vendors are getting bought out that you would never think happens, right? Like, Carbon Black got bought over by VMware, and then VMware got bought over by Broadcom, and now it's completely garbage, and the thing is product is done and nobody's supporting it, right? So what do you do in this case is when you're like relying on a pretty big vendor that you never thought is going away, and all of a sudden they're changing or going away, right? So that's been a challenge, and it seems to be like it's almost like if you watch NBA and you see the trade deadline and you see Luka Doncic got traded, what? It will never happen. Like same with this, like what Palo Alto brought Curator, Broadcom bought VMware. Like it's all these plays that you don't think will ever happen, but they do happen. So does that throw everything out of the box? Like, I think we can start looking into smaller players now, because if it's a startup that's going to exit in 5 years, it's no different than like maybe a big enterprise that might not be there now for as long as you thought it might be there, if that makes sense. So we started being more open to not just enterprise grade product. We started looking into give the startups a chance, because, you know, you never know who's going to get bought over, right? And that might change some of your strategy and your reliance on some of these tools and products.
Fascinating. All right, Joe, I know you answered a little bit in the chat, but I think it's worthy of you actually talking it through. So
Appreciate it. Yeah. So I think from our perspective is we really want to have these conversations with our existing vendors and partners, because when we talk about tactical advantage, one, it's important for us that at least where we see gaining value is benchmarking us against our peers. So we work with like our managed service provider, and we talk about, well, from your other clients, how are we stacking up, and providing those metrics back, so that we can actually evaluate what our maturity is in the space. And we use tools like MITRE Framework, right, to identify, hey, here's our areas where we need to maybe provide some additional focus, have those tooling conversations. And I didn't want to lean too heavily on the AI conversation because it's easy and apparent, but these things are prevalent in all the tools, and they're becoming more and more available and more invasive in a way, in the way that we do our day-to-day job. But I think there's definitely some value when we talk about, like in the IR space, having AI actually look at the activity and do the correlation that was typically done by an incident responder. I think there's some value with the AI engines being able to build a story, right, more effectively and quickly, and decide, hey, maybe you should do this action where you might be thinking of. So it gives you a better insight about the technologies and the tooling. Once the AI platform understands what's available and your capabilities, it gives you sort of like a preemptive idea of like, maybe I should do this versus that. And Tom, talking about your SIEM space, we've been having the same conversation over the last couple of years. We talk about the legacy SIEMs and building detections within the SIEM platform. There's some latency there, right? Because they got to get the logs in. They sometimes need to normalize. You got to do correlation, versus just doing the detections directly on the technology themselves. And I think that's a big conversation that we've been sort of having internally and with our partners. Instead of having detections and managing detections within the SIEM, actually just have the detections sitting locally at the source. So like at the EDR, for example. And then when we talk about long-term log compliance, just dump all the logs into a data lake. Just put them in a data lake, have the detections locally, and I think when we start talking about how we want to mature that, there's definitely some cost savings. It really depends on what your log retainment looks like for a compliance standpoint. If you can use like Glacier storage to satisfy those requirements, but when we talk about tactical changes, it's really working with our partners to understand, well, these are the requirements that we have. This is the funding that we have. This is the prioritization. And then we do want to consume AI responsibly. But I think we really want to lean hard on our partners to figure out, is AI really the solution, or is there just a maturity that we need to work together to bring that platform some more value from what we're paying for?
yeah, makes sense. Thank you for expanding. David.
So I would like to touch on a couple of topics that my colleagues have already mentioned. First of all, I like what Tom has already said regarding the solutions which have already established themselves on the market as a reputable name, and suddenly they turn into something else which is not so useful anymore. And for us, at least, as an organization, I'm driving our cybersecurity program into being open to incorporating let's say startup solutions and sometimes open source solutions, because you cannot over rely on someone that take care of you forever, because business is changing. all the time. We don't like to overcommit to vendors. Once 1 to 2 years contracts is the way that we are doing our business, and that's the way that we are using to evaluate solutions and receive a better perspective on what exactly is doing the job and what not. One of the deficiencies on the cybersecurity market is the fact that sometimes vendors are promising things that their solutions cannot deliver, and it most of the times during the POC, it turns out that something was promised that it's not working quite as expected, or even there are a little bit absurd situations in which a vendor has showcased something on its website, and once you try it, it turns out that it's not there. So this is a challenge. Finding a really solid solution that does the jobs and meet the success criteria is something that is hard to find. And having in mind this, one of the other difficulties, at least for us, is having too many vendors. With each vendor, even though you have a contract, NDA, and so on and so forth, they could be potentially breached. We've already seen the last couple of years what happened to models like Proofpoint, FireEye, and so on and so forth, companies that no one thought that they could be ever compromised, and still they got compromised. And with each new vendor for the organization, there is a new attack vector. So we are also looking for ways to consolidate our solutions, because currently, for example, we have a cloud security solution, then we have browser security solution, a DLP, a SIEM, EDR, and so on and so forth. So this is something that is also important, because too many vendors tend to make our third-party, fourth-party risk management program a little bit difficult. And on the top of that, with DORA on our doorsteps, we have to be extremely careful about that. So this is something that is important for us, for sure.
Excellent. All right. So there've been some great questions that have been coming in as well. So I want to pivot to a couple of those. The first one is that I want to ask you all is for 2025. And I want to talk about what you think you're going to do for 2025 is, how are your security programs being tracked or measured for you to demonstrate the value of the program? So how are you demonstrating to leadership, right, the success criteria? And then how are you doing that? Is that tooling, or are you using manual spreadsheets? But how are you accomplishing the generation of the measurement of metrics to be able to present the success of the cybersecurity program? Tom, I'll let you go first.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I'll have to be honest and say that we don't have a tool. I would love to have a tool. We looked at a few tools. I think there are two problems with those type of tools. A, you need to manually go through a annoying process of putting in everything you have, because they don't always have times to actual, tools themselves, right? So if there was an API way of connecting these tools into this, I think it will make life a little easier, but there's more to it. You need to also plug in like your risk policies, governance process, any criteria you have, any list of crown jewels, because that's also important. Like, I mean, I think we right now, we have spreadsheets, risk registrar, we have policies. A lot of these discussions happen on the security steer committee, where we look through incidents, we look through threats, and then we try to say, look, if this was not blocked, we would have been in the news, or there will be X amount of dollar value to it, but there's never really a concrete, quantifiable way of really showing that. And I think that's something that's it's tricky to do, but I think it's doable. I think if people put in the time and effort, and it has to be a business effort, not just a security effort, meaning you need to get stakeholders from across the business to come and say, is this really a crown jewel? Like what keeps you up at night? And then as a result, can we take that and do some threat modeling to understand if a ransomware hit this, particular device, it's not going to impact the whole business, but it's still important enough from a, brand perspective. Might be in the news. So I think it's probably a journey that you have to bring everybody on board, but I think a tool is probably makes sense and it will be super important. There are not a lot of tools out there that do that. And I'm curious why. Is it because it's just a hard problem to solve and there's not enough, buying from it? Because I think every CISO, you tell them, if I can log in first thing in the morning, go to this dashboard, see my risk tool dashboards that shows me everything we have and all the risks. I mean, I would pay all the money in the world to have that if that's available, right? I think there's a reason why there's nothing out there that's like in the Gartner, Magic Quadrant or what have you around that type of issue. And a lot of CISOs are complaining about it, but this doesn't seem to be a lot of solutions for that, particularly today, that I'm aware of at least.
Wow, great summary. David.
So, yeah, so generally speaking, it depends, but to be honest with you, I'm still using the spreadsheets and not an automated process. As Tom said, I would love to have a solution that would do some of the annoying tasks for me. But one of my big concerns is the data privacy with these tools, because uh, this is something which is really critical for the organization. And here we are not discussing SCA solution that scans for open source libraries, which are generally available. This is a tool that would work with strictly confidential information. And that's why I have tested in the last couple of years a couple of solutions, but there was no one solution that really made me think to switch to an automated process, because as I mentioned, one of the concerns for me is this data privacy and what would potentially happen with this data if it goes into wrong hands.
I appreciate the honesty, right? So for the folks listening, right? I mean, this is brutal truth here, right? This is, man, it's just hard in spite of everything. Michael.
Sorry, I'm not used to being called by that name, so it didn't register for me. Yeah, so we had this problem, right? We were investing in so many tools, and there wasn't a single source of truth that we could rely on. And so we actually looked at this problem a few years ago and discovered this category called ASPM, right? Application Security Posture Management. And the idea there is that you're going to adopt sort of like a hub and spoke model, right? Where all your point solutions like Sneak or like Wiz all funnel into one place where you can have one dashboard. You can see all your risks in one place and categorized by their actual risk, right? Like, because one application might say, oh, this is a critical, but is that really the same as the critical on another application, right? So the thing I like about the platform we're using is that it overlays like real-time threat detection that's happening in the real world, right? So now you can see that CVE 2025 whatever is actually being attacked in the wild, and therefore this is something that's more important than something that's not, even though they're in the same severity level. So I think Tom, you might want to look into that space. That it's a very you've described the problem almost specifically to what they're doing. And how we track our progress is through this metric called MTTR, right? Mean time to remediation. And it's basically telling us like how effective are we at reporting and remediating the issues that we're finding in our point solutions. And that's a running metric that gets reported to our board every quarter. So that's it for me.
That is a fascinating metric. That they compared to preventive percentage of people that took the annual security awareness training, or percentage of the population that is MFA deployed, right? I mean, that is such a different perspective of effectiveness of the security program versus efficiency. So I appreciate that. Joe?
Yeah, I think we all had a similar challenge, right? It's nothing really new or innovative here. I think what we came to the agreement was internally for the business is that they wanted a dashboard, and again, it's not real time, but it provides them a month-to-month trending of our success, right? Our success stories. So we basically aggregate certain control information and metrics around scoring for products. Like Microsoft provides scoring around your effective deployment of like MDE or Defender for Identity, things like that. So we take these aggregate scores that come across multiple different platforms, and we feed it into Power BI. And Power BI is a dashboard that we share with like ITLT, so they can see how well we're doing on a month-to-month basis. And it's effective for them because it's not some new cybersecurity tool that they've got to get acquainted with. I mean, most business folks are pretty familiar with Power BI and how to manipulate data in to suit them. So we didn't create complexities for them. And then again, working with our partners, it was very important as we look at either a new partner or expanding the relationship with an existing partner, we needed to be able to pull this data out of the platform, right? So making sure that they had that data exposed to REST APIs, and then using those tools to ingest into Power BI. But there's been some manual work, right? So we have to create PowerShell scripts to look for accounts that haven't logged to the domain in a certain amount of days or machines, and service accounts that haven't had recycled passwords. You still get that sort of data in a manual fashion. I think from the business perspective, that's the things that they want to look at. But from the cybersecurity perspective, like for reporting to the CISO, we work with our MSSP, and we consider them to be an extension of our IR team. So it's not the MSSP doing casing and detection and response separate from our internal IR team. It's one homogeneous team. So when we talk about metrics like mean time to detect, mean time to respond, mean time to close, those numbers are in unison. So when we talk about, again, earlier with the MITRE framework, those are metrics using NIST to sort of standardize the program. So those are, once we've gotten the buy-in from the business, these are the controls, and these are the frameworks we want to use. It's easier to sort of trend and sort of tactically define what areas that we want to focus on, either quarter by quarter or year by year. So we can show progress back to the business. Hey, we are successful. We are meeting these milestones, and here's the data to represent that for them.
Yeah, that's a very real answer, Joe. I really appreciate it. So, believe it or not, I mean, we're almost at time, but I want to put one more question out there for all of you before we wrap. And it was asked earlier, and I think it's really, really relevant, is, again, for 2025, okay, outsourcing versus insourcing. Because one of the themes we're hearing here, right, is, look, bodies are hard to come by, right? The value of the human, right, as an insource versus outsource, or using AI to be able to augment or replace. So I'd like each of you to give us kind of your perspective for, do you value insourcing or outsourcing? Do you have a preference? And how are you managing that those alternatives for 2025? And David, I'll go ahead and start with you.
Yeah, sure. So, generally speaking, it depends, but it depends on the situation, the project, and so on and so forth. But I would prefer the insourcing approach because of the control factor and the amount of control that you can have over process, program and everything related to it. So the insourcing is the better way for us, at least from my perspective.
Michael?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to whether we can actually successfully staff that role or not, right? Like, I'll give you an example. SOC is a very difficult thing to stand up from going from 0 to 60s. It's a very laborious and big process, right? That will require, you know, team focus and a lot of time. There's just no way that my team will be able to create a SOC, given our size, right? We're on the smaller side as well. If we were a bigger player, then maybe, but given our size, that's just something that we're forced to outsource. Now, if I had the capability, if I had the bigger team, absolutely, there are absolute pros to insourcing that. You have more control, just like David said. You get to set the agenda. When we outsource things to our SOC, sometimes they have other priorities other than what we care about, right? They deal with so many customers. We're probably like fifth on the list. But at the end of the day, we just have to know what are the things that we're capable of and insource those things and outsource anything that we still care about, but don't necessarily have the manpower to do. So it's we just have to be very tactical with what we choose to do. I can't say that it's we're always going to insource or we're always going to outsource it. We just have to take it on a case by case basis.
Fair enough. Tom?
Yeah, I agree with my panelists. I think we've answered this in the chat as well, but maybe I would add to that yeah, the reality is it really depends. I mean, I think if I came in as a new CISO and the team was like 80 folks in security, and we wanted to save money, then that's an easy excuse to go, outsourcing if you kind of take the, 20 people who are underperforming and they realize that you can just outsource this whole thing. I think when I started, I had a big thing around privacy, and as security practitioners, we weren't as comfortable with outsourcing. But I think once cloud became more of a reality where everything is in the cloud, the reality is, you might be okay with a hybrid approach where if there are areas where you're wasting your time and money and efforts to, let's say, look at level 1 alerts from the SOC and you want to outsource just that, or level 1 alerts from your EDR, then we leverage our MDR to do just that. Like, hey, just look at all these alerts that are coming in and just escalate the ones to my team. And then essentially your team becomes more of a level 2, level 3, where they feel also more productive in their career aspiration, that they're not just stuck opening tickets and closing tickets, because then you don't need a security analyst for that, right? Like you can be a support desk, you can be a customer service person, because all you do is you're reading a ticket and you're sending it to the right person. You're at that point not really triaging anything. So you can do things like that where you take a hybrid approach, and we've done that. Like, hey, we want to look at everything that's coming in, but it's not humanly possible. So then through automation and outsourcing, you are able to empower also your team to feel like, they have to actually look at something and make decisions and think harder. And then if they don't know, then you have a SME or an engineer that can then support you, or you reach out to a partner if it's something even more complicated than that. But that's kind of like the approach we've been taking to outsourcing and sourcing.
Yeah, I would say you guys are pretty consistent in the conversation here, which is the SOC is like a highly visible target for this, right, in MSSPs, but the other components, right, have value. Joe, bring us home on this question.
Yeah, I would reiterate what Tom said. Putting on my engineering hat, it depends, right? It really depends on the folks. The reason why we're having a conversation about insource or outsourcing Where are we getting the talent from? Is the talent better suited internally? Do we want to mature our people, right? Are we actually supporting the people that we have on board, and we want to train them and mature them in their careers? So for me, it's like, it's really a hard conversation, because if you said in this specific use case, would you insource or outsource, then I'd be able to give you, a little bit more of an illustration of how we would handle it. But since it's so broad, I would say it depends. There isn't a situation where I would say we wouldn't look at outsourcing for a particular role or responsibility. My personal opinion is that when we talk about like incident response, I would want those people to be internal, because when a situation arises, I want to be face to face with the person to understand what's going on, right? More like engineering work. So if I was looking at bringing on a new product, engineering and architecting a solution, sure, I would definitely look at someone external based on merit and capability and interest to do the deployment. So yeah, again, I think it's a hard question to answer because it's so broad. But I think from our perspective, we're open to either one. It just depends on what puzzle we're trying to solve.
Cool. All right. With that, I would like to thank our panelists personally as a moderator, first for being so open and honest. These were hard questions for 2025 that people really want to know. And so providing that brutal truth was really important. And to the vendors and sales folks and everybody listening, okay, you've had a chance to see 4 different potential clients, right? And which ones do you want to go after? Or how would you position what you do to be able to, right, get a second date with all of them? And with that, thank you. I'll hand it over to Val to close.
That's great. Thank you, Steve. And thank you to our great panelists. This was incredibly insightful, in my own opinion, and I hope the 20 people that joined also feel the same way. We wanted to make this very unique and valuable, and I think our panelists did that. And Steve, thank you for doing another world-class moderating performance here. Really appreciate it. And the insights that were shared with our ambassadors, I think were incredibly insightful and priceless. And Execweb, so that we're known for having very high quality meetings and focusing on quality versus quantity. Many of you heard what our 4 panelists were looking for when it comes to their projects in this year, 2025. If you are potentially offering any of these services that they highlighted, please let me know directly via LinkedIn, or you can email me at val@execweb.com. We're not going to facilitate any meetings without the consent of the actual ambassadors, of course, because we want to make sure that there is always a double opt-in and business intent for any meetings that we facilitate. We have done that in the past, and we're going to continue to do that in the future. So again, thank you everyone for joining. It was a pleasure and an honor to be part of this webinar. And later, at a later stage, we're going to share some of these insights publicly as well. But for now, if anyone wants a copy, please let me know. Thanks so much. Thank you, everyone. Have a pleasant day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.